squared. So negative 2 squared is negative 2 times itself. Negative 2 times negative 2 would be positive 4. Negative 1 squared, negative 1 times negative 1 would be positive 1. 0 squared would be 0 times 0. 1 squared would be 1 times 1. And 2 squared would be 2 times 2. Graphing these points. Our biggest y value is 4, so we can go 4 spots in each direction. The x-axis again goes left and right. The y-axis goes up and down. First point, negative 2, 4. Negative 2 is 2 spots to the left. Positive 4 is 4 spots up. Next point, negative 1, 1. Negative 1 is 1 spot to the left and 1 spot up. 0, 0 is at the origin or the middle of the graph. 1, 1 will be to the right 1 and up 1. And 2, 4, positive 2, and up to 4. 5 spots, it makes a U shape, which is also known as a parabola shape. So we can connect those, and we'll put arrows out at the end because the graph will keep rising on both sides. Next question and final graph for this section is f parentheses x. Also read out loud as f of x. It's a fancy term for y. And the equation is negative 1/2 x squared. Same steps we had before. We'll do a t-table. X and y. Y again is the same thing as f parentheses x. And we'll use the same numbers, negative 2 down to positive 2. This time when we plug the numbers in, we'll square the numbers first, and then we're also going to multiply by negative 1/2, or take half the number and then make it negative. So negative 2 squared, negative 2 times negative 2 would be positive 4. Half of that 4 would be 2, and we're multiplying by negative, so it would be negative 2. Plugging a negative 1 in, negative 1 squared, negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Taking half of 1, it's 1/2, and you make it negative, so it'd be negative 1/2. 0 squared would be 0. Half of 0 is still 0, and negative 0 would still be 0. 1 squared would be 1. Half of 1 would be 1/2. Negative makes it negative 1/2. And last number, 2 squared. 2 squared would be 4. Half of 4 would be 2, and negative outside makes it negative 2. What you'll notice on parabolas is we'll have the same y value for a couple points, and that's what makes the parabola or U shape. Graphing this one, we have 2's and negative 2's, so we can go 2 in each direction. We'll graph all 5 points, and it should make a parabola shape. Negative 2, negative 2. X is negative 2 and y is negative 2. Negative 1 and negative 1/2. Negative 1 is to the left. Negative 1/2 is halfway between 0 and negative 1. 0, 0 again would be right in the middle. 1 and negative 1/2. And 2, negative 2. This time again, all 5 points make a U shape or parabola shape. This time the parabola is upside down. It opens down to the bottom. And the reason for that is if you have a negative number in front, that flips all the points down to negative. For the next two problems, we're going to identify the vertex and state the minimum and maximum. The vertex is the point where the graph turns around. And a minimum or maximum, a minimum means it has a lowest point, and a maximum means it has a highest point. If we look at the first graph, we can find the vertex. Again, the vertex is the point on top of this graph where the parabola turns upside down. And we'll list the point as a xy comma point. This point is 2 spots to the right and 4 spots up. So the point of the vertex would be 2, 4. For a minimum or maximum, minimum means it has a lowest point, maximum means it has a highest point. This graph goes up to the top and then turns back down, so it goes up to the highest point possible, which would be a maximum. So our vertex for the first graph would be 2, 4, and this parabola has a maximum point, which is the vertex. Second question, same thing, we can find the vertex of the graph given. The vertex again is the point where the graph turns around. In this case it would be on the bottom of the graph. This point is 2 spots to the left and on the y-axis. That point would be -2, and the y value would be 0. For a maximum or minimum, this graph goes down to the bottom and then curves back to the top, so it goes to a lowest point. The lowest point is also a minimum. So the vertex of this graph, -2, 0, and it has a minimum value or lowest point. Title of the first section is Graph, Parabolas. First equation is f of x, f parentheses x, which again is a fancy notation for y, and the equation is x squared plus 2. Same steps as we did in the previous lesson. We'll make a t-table, and we'll use the numbers -2 down to +2. For this question, we'll be squaring the numbers first and then adding 2 to the value. So for the first problem we have -2 squared. -2 times -2 would be +4, and adding 2 to that, our y value would be 6. -1 squared would be +1. And again, adding 2 from the equation, our y value would be 3. 0 squared would be 0. Adding 2 to that would be 2. 1 squared would be 1. Adding 2 to that would be 3. And last number, 2 squared, 2 times 2 would be 4. And adding 2 to that would be 6. Graphing these points to make a parabola shape. We have 6 on the y-axis, we'll go up to 6, and a couple spots on the x-axis. First point, -2 and 6. Again, the x-axis goes left to right, and the y-axis goes up and down. So -2, 6 would be to the left for -2, and then up to +6. -1, 3. To the left and -1, and up to +3. 0, 2. 0 for the x would be in the middle. 2 for the y value would be 2 spots up. And 1, 3. 1 to the right and 3 up. And 2, 6. 2 to the right and 6 up. Again, parabola shapes, when you have a x squared in the equation, should make a u shape. Connect them to make the parabola shape, and you can put arrows on each side as the parabola continues up. Next question, and last question for this section. Y equals -1/2 x squared plus 4. Same steps, we'll do a t-table. And we'll use the same numbers, -2 down to +2. This time when we plug numbers in, we'll square the number first, take half of that number and make it negative, and the last step we'll add 4 to it. Make sure to follow PEMDAS. We'll do exponents first, then multiply, and then add. First step, we have -2 squared. -2 squared would be +4. Half of that 4 would be 2, and the negative makes it a -2. And we're adding 4 on the end. So -2 plus 4, our y value would be +2. Same steps for the next number. -1 squared. -1 squared would be +1. Half of 1 would be 1/2. It is negative also, so we're subtracting. And we have +4 on the end. -1/2 plus 4 is the same as 4 minus 1/2, which we can make that 3.5. Plugging a 0 in. 0 squared would be 0. Half of 0 would still be 0. -0 would still be 0. And adding 4 to that would be +4. Plugging a 1 in. 1 squared would be +1. Half of 1 would be 1/2. And that negative out front makes it -1/2. Plus 4. And again, it's the same thing as 4 minus 1/2, which would be 3.5. And last number 2. 2 squared would be 4. Half of 4 would be 2. That negative makes it -2. And plus 4 from the equation. -2 plus 4 would be 2. And again, you'll see some double numbers in the y value. Again, that's what makes the parabola shape. For the y values, we'll go up to 4. And graphing the points, -2, 2, to the left, 2, and up 2. -1 and 3.5. -1 and 3.5 would be just past 3. 0, 4. 0 for the x values in the middle, and 4 is up 4 spots. 1 and 3.5, to the right 1, and up to 3.5, which again is between 3 and 4. And 2, 2. To the right 2, and up 2. Again, this graph is a parabola shape that points downwards. The reason, again, it points downwards is if you have a negative number in front of the x squared, that flips all the values upside down. Last section of notes today is titled Ordering. Graphs from widest to narrowest. A wide graph will be a graph that starts on the left and kind of curves down to the right, but real wide. Narrow is kind of a tall, skinny graph. The 3 graphs will do for the first problem. y equals 3x squared. Second graph, y equals 1/2 x squared. And the third one, y equals 4x squared. Each of these graphs would be a parabola shape. When you have a number in front of the x, that's going to multiply or change the number of the y value. For a wide graph, you want a small number that's close to 0. For a narrow graph, that would be a big number or highest number. So the widest graph is the smallest number, closest to 0. In this case, it's 1/2. So the widest graph would be 1/2 x squared. The next widest graph, again, the second number that's closest to 0, we have 3 and 4. 3 would be the next one. And the narrowest graph, the tallest graph, would be the biggest number, 4x squared. So the widest graph again would be the shortest graph, and the narrowest would be the tallest graph with the biggest number. Take a look at one more, last question for this section. F of x equals negative 2x squared. Second graph, f of x equals negative 2/3 x squared. And the last graph, f of x equals negative 4x squared. When you have negative numbers, again, it's not the smallest number, but the number closest to 0. We have negative 2, negative 2/3, and negative 4. Negative 2/3 would be the closest to 0, which makes it the widest or shortest graph. So f of x, negative 2/3 x squared, will be our first graph when ordering from widest to narrowest. The next one, number closest to 0 after negative 2/3, would be negative 2. And the last one, the number farthest away from 0, would be negative 4. Title of the first section today is Finding the Vertex. Axis symmetry. And graph. Few formulas and definitions for this section. The vertex, again, is the point where the graph turns around. The equation for that, x equals negative b over 2a. And we'll use the equation ax squared plus bx plus c. So a would be the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the last number. To find what y is, we will solve. Once we find x, we can plug it in and solve for y. Second definition, the axis symmetry. Axis symmetry will be the same as the vertex. X equals negative b over 2a. Symmetry means one side of the graph will be the same as the other side. And the line that cuts it in half would be negative b over 2a. And the last definition for this section, the parabola will open up if a is greater than 0, and the parabola open down if a is less than 0. So if a is a positive number, the parabola opens up. If a is a negative number, then the parabola opens down. First question we'll solve. Y equals 2x squared plus 4x minus 5. To find the vertex, again we'll use the equation negative b over 2a. A is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c we'll get to in a little bit is negative 5, the last number. So negative b, middle number is 4, which would be negative 4. 2 times a is the first number, which is 2, so 2 times 2. 2 times 2 would be 4, 4 divided by 4 would be 1, and they have a negative on there, so it's negative 1. This is what x is equal to for the vertex. To find out what y is equal to, we have to solve or take this number and plug it back into the equation. So y equals, plug a negative 1 into the x squared. Negative 1 squared would be positive 1, times 2 would be 2. Negative 1 for the x, 4 times negative 1, that would be negative 4. And minus 5 would stay the same. 2 plus a negative 4 is the same as 2 minus 4, that would be negative 2. And negative 2 minus 5 would be negative 7, which is what y is equal to. So our vertex, x equals negative 1, y equals negative 7. We can write that as a point, negative 1, comma, negative 7. The axis of symmetry, again, is the same equation. But it is just the x value, so it's just negative 1. And this parabola either opens up or down. Looking back at the equation, we have a positive 2x squared. If the x squared is positive, then this graph opens up. Last part will be to graph. If we have a vertex, negative 1, negative 7. Negative 1 would be the x value. Negative 7 would be the y value. The axis of symmetry, we'll draw a dashed line straight down through the vertex. This cuts the graph in half, so one side looks exactly the same as the other. And this parabola opens up, which means it'll start at the top, curve down to the vertex, and then the curve on the right side looks the same. Try one more of these. Last question for the section. F of x is negative x squared plus 4x minus 4. Again, find the vertex. The equation negative b over 2a. In this case, b is positive 4, but negative b makes it a negative 4. And 2 times a is a number in front of x squared. In this case, it's negative 1, so 2 times negative 1. So we'll have negative 4 over negative 2, which is equal to positive 2. And negative b over 2a is what x equals, so x equals 2. Find the y value. Y again is the same as f of x. We'll take the 2, plug it in for x, and solve for y. In this case, we'll plug a 2 in, do the exponents, and then we'll make the answer negative. So 2 squared would be 4. That minus makes it a negative 4. 2 times 4 would be 8, and minus 4 stays the same. Negative 4 plus 8 would be positive 4. And subtracting the 4 on the end would be 0. Again, that's the y value, so y is equal to 0. Our vertex, again, we can make a point. X is equal to 2, y is equal to 0, so our vertex would be 2, 0. The axis of symmetry, again, makes the line or graph symmetrical. It's the same value as the vertex. In this case it's 2, but it's just the x value, x equals 2. And the graph can either open up or down. Looking back at the equation, if it's a negative x squared, negative values are less than 0, so this graph will open down. Graphing from here, we can draw the xy axis. The vertex is 2, 0. The x value would be 2. The y value would be 0. The axis of symmetry, again, is a dashed line. It goes down the middle of the graph. This graph opens down, so rather than a curve that opens up, the curve will open upside down. And that'll be our graph for the equation. Last section today is titled More Graphene. First equation is y equals 2x squared plus 4. Same steps as before. We'll do the equation negative b over 2a, find the vertex, and then we'll graph. B again is the middle number in front of the x. There is no x in the middle here, so b is equal to 0 over 2 times a, which would be 2 times 2. 0 over 4 would be 0, which would be our x value. Find the y value, we'll plug 0 in. 0 squared would be 0, times 2 would still be 0. Adding 4 to that, our y value would be 4. So for this question, our vertex, make it a point. X is 0, y is 4. That would be 0, 4. The axis of symmetry, again, is the same as the vertex, just the x value though, not the y value. X is 0, so our axis of symmetry is x equals 0. And the direction either opens up or down. Looking back at the equation, positive 2x squared. If it's positive, the parabola opens up. Graphing this question, we have a vertex of 0, 4. 0 would be in the middle, and we can go up 4 spots. The axis of symmetry is right down through the vertex, a dashed line, this time on top of the y-axis. And the direction's up, so we'll have a parabola that curves through the vertex and opens up. Last question for this section. F of x equals negative 3 x squared plus 6x plus 5. Again, we'll do the same equation, negative b over 2a, to find the vertex. B in this case is a number in front of x, which is 6. The negative makes it negative 6. And 2 times a is the first number, which would be negative 3. We'll have negative 6 over negative 6, which is equal to 1. So the x value of the vertex is equal to 1. Plugging the 1 into the equation. 1 squared would be 1. Negative 3 would stay the same. 6 times 1, 6 would stay the same. And plus 5. Negative 3 plus 6 would be 3. Plus 5 more would be 8. So our vertex for this question would be 1, 8. Graphing. We can do our axis of symmetry. Is x equals 1, and the direction also before we graph, we have a negative 3x squared, so this graph opens down. our vertex 1, 8.